Hi, I'm Paris, and it was nearly 20 years ago that I took my first DNA test. Cost $450, and they tested 10 spots on my DNA. What I learned was that my ancestors were likely Danish Vikings that had invaded and settled in England, which was interesting. They even sent me a certificate, but that was it. Right now, if you get DNA testing, it costs between $49 and $99 usually, and they test about 700,000 spots on your DNA. They can tell you where in the world your family may have come from. They can tell you about traits that you're likely to have and illnesses that you may be a carrier for, or maybe something you should talk to your doctor about the chances of coming down with. DNA testing has come a long way, so much cheaper and so much more information that you gain from it. I had my DNA tested by the most popular DNA testing companies. So I'll see how do they match up. Do they say that I'm from the same place? As well as the traits and the health risks. Which test will you likely learn the most from?
Epic review, guys.
Here are the companies I've had test my DNA. There's 23andMe, AncestryDNA, which is part of Ancestry.com, the big genealogy website. Let's start with 23andMe. Here on a page from their website, you can see some of the things you'll learn about from having them test your DNA. Now, my father also has had the 23andMe testing as well as my children. However, my wife has preferred the AncestryDNA testing. And I think she's this Christmas getting her mother tested with AncestryDNA as well as some of her cousins. She prefers that because of the genealogical bent to why she's having the DNA testing done. Now, 23andMe started out focusing on the health side of DNA testing, and that's really their strongest suit. But they've pulled in lots of ancestral components, and we can click here on View Report to see what 23andMe says I'm comprised of. Here's a pretty good breakdown of where my contributing ancestors came from. You can see it's very largely European, mostly British, Irish. And that I knew from the family history research I've done. I've been able to trace things back a couple hundred years at least. And on my father's side, it's from England. My mother's side, it's from Ireland. But to add a little bit of spice to my vanilla, I've got a 0.2% showing as coming from North Africa or Arabia, and 0.1% from Japan. Where in the world did those come from? Some interesting mysteries to look into in the future. A little further down on that screen is my ancestry timeline, which suggests when those ethnicities may have been introduced into my family tree. And even further down on that screen, I can see a layout of my actual chromosomes and where the tested parts are that match up with the different ethnicities. My ancestors were basically south of the ice fields during the last ice age in the southern part of Europe, and as the ice melted, they followed and moved north and eventually, apparently, invaded from Scandinavia and ended up in England. And with 293 Neanderthal variants in my DNA, I'm more Neanderthal than 77% of the people tested. What does that mean? Maybe that when I married someone from Mexico, I wasn't doing something as groundbreaking as I thought. As I mentioned, 23andMe originally focused on the health information you could get from DNA testing. So let me show you what things they found out about my health. Here you can see my genetic health risks. Age-related macular degeneration. I do have one variant of a gene, but I have only one copy of it. So that means I'm not at increased risk. However, I can pass that on. Fortunately, none of us has two copies of it, so we don't have an increased risk of that. This is their wellness section. Some of their predicted results may be from studies or maybe from the data they've actually accumulated. With 23andMe, you have your DNA tested, but if you wish, you can join research programs that they have where mostly it's answering questions. I've signed up for that. So I'm not only a customer benefiting from the DNA studies they've done, I'm actually a participant, a subject in one of the studies, or perhaps more. And this is the carrier status page. There are quite a few here. Some of them you probably never heard of. Others like cystic fibrosis you probably have. And if you have a variant of the gene that determines whether your child would come down with that, then you might want to be sure someone you're going to marry and have children with also has the testing done, because if you both have the variant, then there's a much higher chance your child would come down with that illness. This is their traits page. Some of these are kind of silly. The asparagus odor detection, I definitely can smell that. Bald spot, likely no bald spot. I guess they may call this more than a spot. As I mentioned with 23andMe, you can be a participant in the studies, so as they learn more about DNA, they may be learning it from you. And you can opt out of this as well. This is where they find people who share snippets of DNA that indicate you're a fairly close relative. As I mentioned, my wife's from Mexico, so she has ancestors that came from Spain. She also has Native American. So combining that with mine, this shows that my daughter has 61% European, whereas I'm 99.7%. She's got 33.6% East Asian and Native American, probably largely Native American, whereas I have just 0.1%. And though I'm a proud Neanderthal DNA bearer, my daughter may be glad to know she doesn't have quite as much Neanderthal in her. Now with 23andMe, you can take a less expensive AncestryDNA test only, where you won't see the health results. If you want everything that you've seen that I received in my testing, that's the more expensive combined test. With AncestryDNA, of course, their original focus was ancestral DNA testing, but they are now pulling in some of the traits and health elements that 23andMe offers. And Ancestry.com, of course, is, I think, the world's largest genealogical website, and I've got my family tree out there. Here on my DNA home screen with Ancestry, you can see my DNA story and my ethnicity estimate pretty close to what it showed with 23andMe. So this is definitely similar to the 23andMe map, though I think I was more Scandinavian. Well, that does not bode well for my Danish Viking ancestors that I found out about almost 20 years ago with my $450 DNA test. So what about the non-European percentages that showed up in my 23andMe testing? That little tiny bit from Japan and the very small percent, I think it was from North Africa or the Middle East. They don't show up at all here. So I don't know if that's because if it's not a certain percentage, they just exclude it or they round up or their testing is different. If 23andMe has gone out and tested more people in Asia, they may see that little chunk of DNA that's the same as what I have, whereas Ancestry doesn't have access to that. I'm not sure why. And this is sort of similar to the family history timeline on 23andMe. You can go back to 1700 and see what was going on then. So it looks like I had ancestors that went to the US then, and I do know from one line on my grandmother's side that is the case. And here at 1900, we're up to when my grandmother was born, and that is when the family split. The East Coast family, some of them went to Washington State, Seattle, where most of my family still lives, and some went to California. In my DNA relationships page on Ancestry.com, I've got 2 people here listed as first cousins. I'm cutting off their name and other information for privacy. Several second cousins, and then a whole bunch more from there on down. When I go to View Match, I can compare our results. I can also send them a message. The message sending does seem to be free. That's good. And I do have a DNA circle. I think these are people that are confirmed to be relatives and pretty much confirmed to be in the family tree. When I click on it to find out more, oh look, if I would like to find out more, I have to sign up for at least a monthly membership. Now that's pretty much what I can show you. Ancestry does the ancestry side of DNA, except, take a look at this, brand new, they now have AncestryDNA traits for an additional $10 when you're tested. A lot of similar stuff to what 23andMe will show you in their traits section. If you catch them at the right time, when they're having a sale, you can get testing done from each of these companies for about $50. If you want to add on some of the health or traits, it's a little bit more with Ancestry. It'll be about twice as much with 23andMe, but you do get lots more information for that money. So if it's your $50 or $100 you're going to be spending this Christmas, whether on testing for yourself or as a gift, which one provides the most information and the most entertainment? It's the most fun to find out about. My opinion is 23andMe gives you the most information and presents it in the most interesting way, the way you want to tell somebody, hey, look at this, I just found this out about me. Now, if you are already a member of Ancestry or the person you're giving it to, they're big into genealogy, they've got their family tree up on Ancestry.com, and especially if they're already paying that monthly subscription, well, if they get the DNA test done, then they get access to all those genealogical benefits, all the tie-ins, all the connections, all the additional information. So for somebody who's really serious about genealogy and has that Ancestry account, but they haven't done the DNA test yet, that might be a good choice for them. So as a gift for the average person, as a standalone test that you don't have to pay any additional fees or tie into anything else, I think the 23andMe provides the most bang for your buck. I'll link DNA testing companies in the description box down below this video. And if you've had the DNA testing done, whether with these companies or another company, I'd like to hear about your experience. Please let me know in the comments. And even if my ancestry is just 100% British Isles, at least I've got that 4% Neanderthal to spice things up. See you on the next review.
Epic